The first thing my mother said to me that night was, "Tessa, sweetheart, don't mention mops or mildew at table 9. Aaron's people are all medical." She said it with a smile on her face and one hand still on my elbow, like she was fixing my posture, not insulting my entire life. I remember exactly what I was wearing because I stood there for a second and looked down at myself like maybe I had misunderstood the room. Black dress, long sleeves, simple gold hoops, low heels, because the event was at the Preston Hotel downtown, and the ballroom had those slick marble floors in the lobby that make you feel like you might slide if you turn too fast. I had a cream coat folded over my arm and my grandmother's watch on my wrist, the small square one with the scratched face that still runs 5 minutes fast. And my father was at the check-in table talking to one of the event staff. My brother Aaron was beside him in a navy tuxedo with his fiancée, Lily, standing close enough to look attached. The room smelled like coffee, perfume, and that lemon furniture polish hotels use when they want everything to feel expensive. Behind them was a huge white sign with gold lettering for the Queen City Business Alliance Winter Gala. My gala. My name was on the program. My company had paid for half the scholarship fund that year. I was there because I was receiving the Founders Impact Award in front of about 300 people. My family did not know that. And before I could say a word, my father looked over at the seating chart, then at me, and said to the young man holding the guest list, "If there's a mix-up with her seat, now just put her at one of the back tables. She won't mind. Front section is mostly sponsors and board." I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding my invitation, still sealed in the cream envelope it had come in, and watched the event coordinator's face change when she looked from him to me and back again. Then my mother leaned in and lowered her voice like she was doing me a kindness. "This isn't really your world, honey. We just want tonight to go smoothly for Aaron." I looked at her, then at my brother, who did what he always did when something ugly was happening right in front of him. Nothing. He adjusted his cufflink. That was the moment. Not because it was the worst thing they ever did, but because it was so polished, so practiced, so normal for them that none of them even heard it. I smiled at the coordinator and said, "No worries. I'm sure it'll sort itself out." Then I stepped aside and let them walk in first. They had no idea what was about to happen. My name is Tessa Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and if you're listening to this, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have known you best, subscribe. Really. Because some of these stories don't start with people screaming. They start with a quiet little sentence that tells you exactly where you stand in somebody else's mind. And I want you to comment one word for me before I keep going. Just one word. Steady. Because that's what I had to become. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in one of those families that looked perfect from the outside and felt cold in very specific places once you lived inside it long enough. My father, a Gerald Monroe, had been a district court judge for 26 years. Even after he retired, people still called him Judge Monroe in restaurants, at church, at charity luncheons, everywhere. He liked that. My mother liked it more. She was the kind of woman who could make a casserole, run a fundraiser, and ruin your mood all without ever raising her voice. She believed in appearances, proper jobs, proper marriages, proper neighborhoods. She ironed cloth napkins for weeknight dinners. That should tell you enough right there. Then there was Aaron. Aaron is my older brother by 3 years, and from the beginning, he was the one people turned toward. He was the one my mother described as driven when he snapped at waiters. The one my father called a natural leader when he interrupted everyone at the table. He was handsome in a very standard way, broad shoulders, white teeth, easy confidence. He played lacrosse, made decent grades, got into Duke, then medical school, then orthopedic surgery. By the time he was 31, my parents spoke about him like he was a family trust fund that had learned how to walk and talk. I was the other child, not the unloved one exactly. That would almost have been easier to explain. I was the manageable one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who noticed things, the one who remembered birthdays and picked up prescriptions and called our grandmother back when nobody else had time. At family dinners, my mother would ask Aaron about his surgeries in detail. How many screws did they need? Was it a clean break? Do you like the new surgical wing? Are they moving you toward leadership? Then she would turn to me with that soft public smile and say, "And how's work, sweetheart?" That was it. How's work? No follow-up, no real curiosity, no question she hadn't already half dismissed. Because in their minds, what I did wasn't a career with shape or weight to it. It was something temporary and slightly embarrassing, like bangs you grew out or a boyfriend you didn't bring around anymore. The funny thing is, I didn't even start out in the field they mocked. I did everything right first. I went to college, University of South Carolina, majored in business administration because that seemed practical and broad enough to keep everybody calm. Graduated in 2015. Worked for 6 months as an account coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm where I spent most of my day correcting decks for men named Brent, who used the word synergy like it was oxygen. I lasted until November. Then I quit. Not dramatically. I didn't storm out. I gave notice, returned my key card, took the little succulent off my desk, and drove home in silence. I had $3,840 in savings, a Honda Civic with 117,000 miles on it, and no plan my parents considered respectable. What I did have was a very specific skill I'd picked up almost by accident during college. Cleaning. Not house cleaning, commercial cleanup. During my sophomore year, I worked nights for a campus facilities subcontractor because it paid $17.50 an hour, which was better than the bookstore and better than waitressing. And because the supervisor, a woman named Celia Vargas, hired fast and trained hard. We cleaned law offices, dental clinics, church buildings, and one giant call center that ate copier paper like it was alive. I learned how buildings worked after hours. I learned how many businesses were held together by people nobody thanked. I learned supply ordering, scheduling, inspection logs, basic floor care, emergency water extraction, all of it. Most people never look at a building and think about who resets it every night so it can pretend to be effortless by 8 in the morning. I did. Celia used to tell me, "There is more money in the work people look down on than in the work they brag about at brunch." I should have listened to her sooner. After I quit the marketing job, I called her on November 18th, 2015 at 7:12 p.m. And I know that because I found the call in my phone records years later and laughed. I asked if she knew anybody selling a small route. She said, "I know one man retiring in January, 2 office buildings and a pediatric clinic. Why?" I said, "Because I think I can do this better." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Come see me tomorrow at 9. Bring a notebook, not an attitude." Celia became the first person in my life who looked at me like I wasn't the extra child in the room. She was 58 then, wore plain black sneakers and red lipstick every day, and ran her whole operation from a folding table in a warehouse office that smelled like bleach, coffee, and printer toner. No one in my family ever met her. If they had, they would have called her nice in that special way people use when they mean beneath notice. But she changed my life. By February of 2016, I had bought that first route for $12,600. I put $3,200 down from my savings. Celia loaned me $4,000 on a handwritten agreement. The seller financed the rest over 10 months. The business had no website, 6 part-time cleaners, 1 broken floor machine, and monthly revenue of about $8,900 if everybody paid on time. It was not glamorous. My first office was a second-hand metal desk in the corner of a storage unit I rented off South Tryon for $95 a month. I did payroll on Tuesdays. I cleaned on Fridays when someone called out. I learned to fix vacuum belts from YouTube. I once drove 40 minutes at 11:30 p.m. because a dentist's office manager found a trash liner missing in one can and decided this was a crisis. I loved it. Not every second. I'm not romantic about hard work. Some nights my back hurt so badly, I sat in my car with both hands on the wheel before driving home. Some clients were ridiculous. Some employees quit without warning. One month I had to choose between replacing a buffer motor and paying my own rent early. But it was mine. My parents never used that word. They called it your little cleaning thing. At first I tried to explain it. I remember Easter Sunday in 2017. My mother had done the table with pale blue place cards and those tiny sugared almonds in crystal bowls she only brought out when company came. My aunt was there, my cousin Rebecca. Aaron had just matched into residency, so naturally the whole meal was really about him. At one point, my father asked Aaron what hospitals he was considering, and the conversation went on for 20 minutes. When there was finally a break, I said, "And I actually signed my 4th commercial property this week, a 6-story office building near South End." My mother smiled and passed the rolls. "That's nice, honey." That was it. Not what kind of contract, not how much it was worth, not how I got it, nothing. I remember I was wearing a green sweater. I remember the air smelled like ham glaze and the lilies my mother always put in the entryway. I remember my plate was still half full and suddenly I couldn't swallow anything. Aaron got a toast for matching into orthopedic surgery. I got another roll. That was the first disrespect that really stayed with me. Not because it was loud, because it was small. Small enough that if I'd repeated it to anyone outside the family, it would have sounded petty. But these things add up. By then, and I was working 6 days a week and bringing in more money than anyone in my family realized. Not rich, not yet, but real money. Enough to hire a full-time operations lead named Naomi Brooks in August of 2017. Naomi was 39, divorced, brilliant with schedules, and absolutely impossible to intimidate. She had worked in hotel operations for years and could look at a staffing board once and tell you exactly where it would break by Thursday. The first time she came to my parents' house to drop off a file I'd forgotten in her car, my mother opened the door, looked at her company polo, and assumed she was one of my employees there to deliver something, which technically she was. But she was also the person helping me build a company. My mother didn't ask her name. After Naomi left, she said, "You really should think about whether you want to keep doing something so physical long term. It's not exactly a future." I remember standing at the kitchen island with my keys in my hand. I said, "It's already a future. You just don't like what it looks like." My mother blinked at me like I'd switched languages. Then she smiled that same thin smile and said, "There's no need to be defensive." That was her favorite move. Put a pin in you, then call the bleeding sensitivity. My father was worse in a cleaner way. He never insulted me directly. He just withheld respect so consistently it became its own message. On June 6, 2018, he invited Aaron to join him at the Mecklenburg Bar Foundation dinner as his guest. Aaron wasn't even a lawyer. He was just the son worth displaying. That same week, and I had signed a school district facilities contract worth $218,000 a year. When I mentioned I had a conflict that night because we were onboarding 3 new sites, my father said, "Well, one day when you have a more transferable career, you'll understand how important relationship building is." I actually laughed, because what did he think I was doing? Mopping in a closet with no people involved? My entire business ran on relationships. Building managers, procurement officers, school administrators, regional directors, vendors, staff, insurance reps. Every contract I won came from trust, consistency, and somebody telling somebody else, "Call Tessa, she gets it done." But in my family's mind, relationship building only counted if you did it wearing cufflinks. Aaron benefited from all of this without ever really asking for it to stop. That's the part I've had to be honest about with myself. He wasn't a movie villain. He wasn't standing in a corner plotting my humiliation. He just liked being the center of gravity, and my parents had trained him to expect orbit. When people admire you your whole life for breathing correctly, you stop noticing who gets moved out of the way to make room. He would ask me shallow questions too. "How's the cleaning empire? Still doing nights? You should hire someone to handle the grunt work if you ever want to scale." I did hire someone, then several someones, then a whole management layer. He never asked enough to know that, because they never asked. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about those years. It wasn't that I was hiding. Not exactly. I would have told them anything they wanted to know. The revenue. Yes, the contracts, the expansion, the 28 employees we had by the end of 2021, the fact that I'd bought a small warehouse off Wilkinson Boulevard for $412,000 and renovated the office myself in stages. The fact that my company, Clean Line Facility Services, had started doing post-construction turnover and emergency restoration, not just janitorial contracts. The fact that on paper, by 31, I was doing better than anyone in my family had ever imagined for me. They never asked. And after a while, I stopped offering. Because there is a certain kind of exhaustion that comes from explaining your life to people who have already decided what it means. So I let them think what they wanted, that I was busy, that I was practical, that I worked too much, that I was doing fine, I guess. Meanwhile, I was building something with real weight, quietly. And by the time we all walked into that ballroom at the Preston Hotel on February 12, 2024, my family still thought I was the daughter with the service job, the sturdy little business, the flexible schedule, the career that could always be pushed to the back table if somebody more important needed the seat. I let them think that right up until the minute the doors opened. And that was a mistake they were all about to make in public. By the start of 2024, Clean Line wasn't a little cleaning thing. It was a regional facilities company with 46 employees, 11 active commercial contracts, 3 school properties, 2 medical buildings, and a 24-hour emergency response line that had become weirdly profitable because nobody thinks about burst pipes and storm damage until water is coming through ceiling tiles at 2:14 in the morning. And our 2023 gross revenue was $2.84 million. I know that number because I stared at it on January 9th while Naomi stood in my office doorway eating almonds out of a paper cup and said, "You know your family still thinks you're one tax bill away from moving back in with your parents, right?" I looked up from my laptop and said, "That feels dramatic." She said, "Is it?" It wasn't. At Christmas the month before, my mother had handed me a silk scarf and said, "I thought this might be nice for client meetings, if you ever have those. If I ever have those." By then, I had spent the previous Tuesday in a boardroom with the property committee for 8 mid-rise office buildings, negotiating a 2-year service agreement worth $640,000. I did not tell her that. I folded the scarf, said thank you, and put it back in the box. That scarf stayed in the back seat of my car until March. That's another thing people don't get when they talk about family dismissal. It's not usually one giant awful moment every day. It's these tiny clean cuts, these polished little assumptions. Death by 1,000 "that's nice, honey" comments while you're standing there with the actual numbers in your head. For years, Aaron's life was treated like public interest, and mine was treated like background noise. When he got engaged to Lily in September of 2022, my parents hosted a dinner at the house with 18 people. My mother had the good china out. My father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for the right occasion. There were printed menus for a family dinner. And I came straight from a site visit because one of our construction cleanup crews had been short, a supervisor, and I needed to walk the final punch list myself. I was 15 minutes late and still smelled faintly like drywall dust, even after changing in the office bathroom. The minute I walked in, my mother looked at my black slacks and plain blouse and said, "Oh, you came straight from work." Not hello. Not glad you made it. Just that. Like work had followed me in and made the foyer less attractive. Aaron kissed Lily's cheek. Everybody watched. My aunt dabbed at her eyes. My father tapped his glass and gave a speech about legacy and family and excellence. Then he looked at Aaron and said, "I've always known you were going to build something impressive." I was 31 years old and had already built it, but he wasn't talking to me. And a little later, while everybody was eating salmon and wild rice, my cousin Rebecca asked Aaron if he and Lily planned to buy in Myers Park or stay in Dilworth. My mother asked whether his hospital would cover conference travel. My father asked about a fellowship opportunity in Atlanta. Then, like an afterthought, my aunt turned to me and said, "And you're still in that warehouse area, right?" I said, "I own the warehouse." She blinked. "Oh, good for you." Then she went right back to asking Lily about bridesmaid dresses. I remember I cut my salmon into 3 pieces, and then just stopped eating. The overhead lights were warm. Somebody had cinnamon candles going even though it was September and still 81 degrees outside. My mother's silver bracelets clinked every time she reached for the water pitcher. Those are the details I remember. Not because they mattered on their own, but because when something hurts and you don't react, your mind starts preserving the room around it. After dinner, Aaron asked me if I could maybe help with some practical wedding stuff, since I was good with logistics. That was how he saw me. Useful, capable, convenient, just never impressive. I said, "What kind of practical stuff?" He said, "Vendor coordination, timelines, maybe handling setup on the day if Mom gets overwhelmed." His wedding was at the Belmont Country Club. Guest count was projected around 210. Their planner had already quoted a management package. He wanted me to do unpaid operations for his wedding because in his mind, I was the family help with a business, not a business owner with a life. I asked, "Do you mean as a gift?" He gave this little laugh. "Oh, I mean as my sister." My mother heard that and jumped in immediately. "It would mean a lot to the family, Tessa. You're so good at that kind of thing." That kind of thing. I said no, very calmly. Just no. The room went quiet for maybe 4 seconds. Aaron looked annoyed, not hurt. My mother looked embarrassed in the way she always did when I stepped outside the role she had already assigned me. My father didn't even look at me. He just buttered his roll and said, "Your brother is under a great deal of pressure. Try not to make everything transactional." That one stayed with me, because everything about my work had always been treated as somehow less dignified and yet constantly available for family use. Advice, labor, planning, errands, last-minute competence. And they wanted the benefits of what I had built without ever respecting the building of it. I wish I could say I stopped showing up after that. I didn't. I still came to birthdays, still sent flowers to my mother on Mother's Day, still handled practical things no one else noticed, like taking my grandmother to a cardiology appointment on October 11th because my mother had too much on her plate and Aaron was on call. I always understood what was needed. That was part of the problem. At the same time, the actual life I was living outside my family kept getting bigger. In November of 2022, we signed our first municipal emergency response contract after a storm system flooded 3 public buildings on the west side. That deal alone added about $31,000 a month in recurring readiness fees, plus call-out work when weather hit. As in February of 2023, we landed a 2-hospital outpatient network for nightly maintenance and sanitization. Not glamorous work, not brag at brunch work, but steady, serious, the kind of contract you build a company around. Our monthly payroll crossed $84,000 that spring. I hired a controller named Min Patel, who wore immaculate button-down shirts and spoke in complete calm even when other people were falling apart. Min is one of those people who can tell you bad financial news in such a measured voice that you almost thank him for it. The first time he reviewed our quarterly numbers with me, he said, "You realize you can't keep introducing yourself to bankers as if you're still small." I said, "I don't do that." He turned the laptop toward me and read from my own email. "Hi, and I run a small facilities company in Charlotte." Then he looked at me over his glasses. "You have mid-7-figure annual revenue. That is not small." I laughed, but he was right. Somewhere along the way, I had started speaking about my own success, the way my family spoke about it, softening it, shrinking it, making it more acceptable, less threatening, easier to swallow. I stopped doing that after Min. Naomi noticed first. She came into my office on May 4th, 2023, around 6:20 p.m., with a binder under one arm and said, "You finally sound like the person who owns this place." I said, "Did I not before?" She leaned on the doorframe. "You owned it. You just didn't always sound like you believed you were allowed to." That hit harder than I expected, because it was true. And there's something strange that happens when the people who raised you keep treating your life like a side note. Even when you know better, some part of you still feels like you need to present your reality in softer colors. Meanwhile, Aaron kept getting brighter lighting. When he and Lily got married on April 29th, 2023, my parents treated it like a state wedding. My mother wore pale blue silk and cried before the ceremony started because the florist had used the wrong shade of white roses near the escort cards. My father stood at the reception with his hand on Aaron's shoulder, introducing him to people as my son, the surgeon. Not my son, Aaron. Not Aaron and Lily. Just the surgeon. I sat at table 14 with two of Lily's cousins and an elderly couple I'd never met, table 14. And I know because I looked at the little folded card twice to make sure I hadn't missed something. Aaron's college roommate's girlfriend was at table 6. One of my father's golf friends was at table 8. I was near the dance floor exit beside the service station where waiters stacked empty water glasses. The room smelled like peonies and butter sauce. There were candles everywhere. Somebody's perfume was too sweet. The band was loud enough that you had to lean in to hear anyone buy the salads. I remember Lily's father came by and said, "And what do you do, Tessa?" I said, "I own a facilities company." He smiled politely and said, "Very practical." That word again. Practical is what people call women's success when they don't want to call it impressive. Later in the evening, when the dancing had started, my mother found me near the hallway outside the ballroom and asked if I could just make sure the gift table is being watched because some of the staff seem young. I looked at her. She looked completely sincere. Her daughter, in heels, in formal makeup, at her own brother's wedding, being assigned unpaid security for the envelopes. I said, "That's something the venue coordinator can handle." She gave me that tight little look. "We're trying to keep things simple." I said, "For who?" She didn't answer. That was another moment I filed away. Not because it was huge, because it was exact. That same month, my company cleared $236,000 in net operating income after payroll, debt service, equipment leases, and taxes set aside. And I know because I approved the quarterly distribution on May 2nd while sitting in my office with my shoes kicked off under the desk and a half-eaten protein bar next to the keyboard. And none of my family knew. Not one of them. They never asked. I'm saying that again because it matters. Nobody in my family knew I had bought a condo in Dilworth under an LLC in July of 2023 as a rental investment. Nobody knew I had paid off the warehouse renovation line 6 months early. Nobody knew I had started speaking at regional procurement events under my full title, founder and CEO of Clean Line Facility Services. Nobody knew a trade association had asked me to join a panel on women in operations because I had quietly become one of the most respected facility vendors in Western North Carolina. They didn't know because they never asked. And after a point, I started protecting what I built by keeping it out of rooms where it would be handled carelessly. The only people who really knew the whole picture were Naomi, Min, and my friend Danny. Danny Mercer has been my best friend since college. She lives in Raleigh now, works in nonprofit development, has a laugh you can hear across a parking lot, and is the only person who can tell me I'm being ridiculous in a way that makes me feel loved instead of corrected. She also saw my family clearly long before I did. In August of 2023, she came down for the weekend, and we met for drinks at a little place in South End with string lights on the patio and uncomfortable metal chairs. And I had just come from my parents' house after a Sunday lunch, where my father spent 40 minutes discussing Aaron's new clinic partnership, and then asked me if I was still mostly doing local contracts. Still mostly doing local contracts. At that point, I had active work in Charlotte, Gastonia, Concord, and Rock Hill. Danny listened to me tell the whole story, took a sip of her drink and said, "Your family is committed to an old version of you because it protects the story they like better." I said, "That feels harsh." She said, "You think harsh is saying it out loud? Tessa, they like a world where Aaron is the visible success and you are the reliable one in the background. Your actual life disrupts the furniture." I laughed so hard at that I nearly choked on a lime. But she was right. My life disrupted the furniture. Now, it messed with the seating chart in their minds, and they were very attached to that seating chart. In October of 2023, I got an email that changed something for me, even though I didn't tell anybody at first. The Queen City Business Alliance had selected me as the 2024 Founders Impact Award recipient for small to mid-sized enterprise growth and community hiring. They cited our workforce development partnerships, our promotion pipeline, and our post-storm emergency response work in low-income public facilities. The ceremony would be held February 12, 2024, at the Preston Hotel Ballroom. I read that email twice, then a third time. Then I just sat there. It was 6:48 p.m. The office had mostly emptied out. I still had my coat on because I'd been about to leave. Outside my office window, the loading bay light had just clicked on. Naomi was down the hall finishing a call with a vendor. Somewhere in the warehouse, a pallet jack squeaked once, and then everything got quiet. I should tell you what that award meant, because it wasn't vanity. The alliance mattered in Charlotte business circles. Not celebrity important. Real important. Property groups, private lenders, operations executives, city procurement people, nonprofit boards, logistics owners, hospitality directors. The kind of room where contracts happen 6 weeks later because somebody remembered how you carried yourself. The kind of room my father respected. The kind of room my mother wanted access to. The kind of room Aaron assumed belonged to people like him. I called Danny first. She answered on the second ring and said, "Why do you sound like you've seen a ghost?" I said, "And I just got selected for the Founders Impact Award." There was this half-second of silence, and then she screamed so loudly I had to pull the phone from my ear. She said, "Do your parents know?" I looked at the email again. Then I said, "No." She laughed, "Wow." And I knew what she was laughing at. Not the award, the fact that this whole massive thing could happen in my life, and the people who raised me would still be standing somewhere assuming I was the least important person in any room we entered together. I didn't tell my family because at first I wanted one thing that belonged to me before it passed through their filters. Then weeks went by, and not telling them started to feel peaceful. The event invitation came in December. Cream envelope, heavy cardstock, gold lettering, one guest allowed. Man, I left it unopened on my kitchen counter for 2 days because I already knew what it was, and I wanted to look at it when I wasn't tired. When I finally opened it, I stood there in socks in my condo kitchen, reading my own name in print. Tessa Monroe, founder and CEO, Clean Line Facility Services. There is something about seeing yourself described correctly when you've been described incorrectly for years. I set that card down and just looked at it. Then I put it in the drawer beside the stove under some takeout menus and spare batteries. I didn't bring a guest, not because I didn't have anyone. Danny offered to drive down. Naomi said she would absolutely come if I wanted backup in heels, but something in me wanted to walk into that room alone. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. Meanwhile, family life rolled on exactly the way it always had. Christmas Eve at my parents' house, New Year's brunch at the club, Aaron talking about a possible practice expansion with Lily, my mother asking whether I'd considered bringing someone serious around because it might help you think bigger about your future. My father asking if I was keeping up with retirement contributions given the unpredictability of small business. I almost laughed in his face at that one. By January of 2024, my personal retirement accounts, brokerage holdings, emergency reserves, and company equity put my net worth at around $3.1 million, depending on valuation method. I had more liquidity than anyone at that dining table besides maybe my father, and even that was debatable. I said, "I'm fine, Dad." He nodded the way people do when they think they're being kind to someone who doesn't know enough to be worried. Aaron never said much during these moments. That was almost worse. He let the hierarchy stand because it served him. He never had to insult me himself. He just kept accepting the better light, the better chair, the better questions. Then came the gala week. On February 8th, my mother called and said the family had all been invited to the Queen City Business Alliance Winter Gala because one of Aaron's major donors for the Hospital Foundation was sponsoring a table and had kindly included us. I stood in my office, phone tucked between my shoulder and ear, looking at a whiteboard full of staffing notes. I said, "Oh, that's nice." She said, "It should be a good night for Aaron. There'll be some important healthcare people there, and Lily's wearing navy. Very elegant. You should come too, if you have something appropriate." If you have something appropriate. I looked down at myself. I was wearing a camel coat over a black knit dress and boots that cost more than my mother would have guessed because she never looked closely enough to tell the difference. I said, "I'll be there." She said, "Wonderful. And Tessa?" I waited. Try not to talk shop all night. Just enjoy yourself. I actually smiled, because that was the whole thing in one sentence. She truly believed my world was the smaller one, the less relevant one, the one that might embarrass us if it spoke too loudly near more polished people. I said, "Don't worry, I know how to behave in a ballroom." There was a pause. Then she said, very lightly, "How? Of course you do." That Friday, Naomi came into my office with the finalized event packet the Alliance had emailed over. My speaking window, the stage order, the award presenter, timing for the sponsor reception. All of it. She closed the door behind her and said, "Have you told them yet?" I shook my head. She set the packet down on my desk and leaned back in the chair across from me. "You know this is going to be insane." "I know. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my mother's voice, my father's assumptions, Aaron's easy silence, years of being placed at table 14 in one way or another. Then I looked at the award packet, and I said, "I think I'm done preparing. I think I'm just ready." Naomi nodded once. Then she reached into the folder and pulled out the place card mock-up the event team had sent over for the head table. White cardstock, black script, Tessa Monroe founder and CEO Clean Line Facility Services. I held that card in my hand for a long time. That was my symbolic object. Not because it was expensive or beautiful, because it was simple and correct. No shrinking, no softening, no "your little thing," no practical girl at the back table, just the truth in writing. I slipped it back into the folder and said, "They're not going to see this coming." Naomi gave me this look. "No," she said, "they're not." And on the night of February 12th, 2024, when my mother adjusted my elbow in the hotel lobby and warned me not to talk about mildew in front of medical people, I already knew exactly where I was sitting. I just let her keep talking, because sometimes the truth works better when you let people fully reveal themselves first. At the night of the gala started the same way every family event with my parents always started, with instructions. At 6:12 p.m., my mother called while I was still standing in my bedroom, deciding between two pairs of heels. I remember the time because the digital clock on my dresser was blinking from a power flicker earlier that afternoon, and I had just reset it when the phone rang. I answered on speaker while I was putting on my earrings. She said, "We're leaving in 10. Are you already on your way?" I said, "Almost." "You are wearing something formal, right? This isn't one of your work events." I smiled to myself. "I know what a gala is, Mom." "Well, I just don't want you to feel out of place. Aaron's donor table is toward the front, and there will be board members there." "Toward the front." I said, "I'll manage." She hesitated, and then lowered her voice the way she does when she thinks she's giving helpful advice. "And Tessa, try not to bring up business tonight. This is more Aaron's crowd." More Aaron's crowd. I looked at myself in the mirror. Black dress, clean lines, nothing flashy. Hair pulled back. My grandmother's watch on my wrist, the one that always runs 5 minutes fast. I wear it to important things because she used to say, "If you're early, you have time to breathe. If you're late, you're already apologizing." I said, "I'll see you there." She said, "Good. And sweetheart?" "Yes." "I'm glad you're coming. It'll be nice to have the whole family together for once." That line almost made me laugh, because we had been together plenty of times, just never in a room where I wasn't the least important person in it. I hung up, had picked up the cream envelope from the kitchen counter, and slid the invitation out again. Queen City Business Alliance Winter Gala, February 12th, 2024. Founders Impact Award Presentation, 8:40 p.m. I looked at my name printed under the program lineup. Then I put the card back in the envelope and left it on the counter. I didn't need to carry it. They already knew who I was. The Preston Hotel lobby was crowded when I walked in. Valet noise outside, people laughing too loudly near the bar, women adjusting dresses, men checking phones. That low hum you get at events where everybody is pretending to be relaxed, but also making sure they're seen. My parents were standing near the check-in table when I spotted them. My father in a charcoal suit, my mother in silver, Aaron in a navy tux, Lily in a dark blue gown that probably cost more than my first car. They looked like the exact family my mother always wanted us to look like. Put together, successful, balanced, until I walked up. My mother's eyes went straight to my dress, then my shoes, then my hair. Approval, relief, calculation, all in about 2 seconds. "Oh, good," she said. "You look very appropriate." Not beautiful, not nice, appropriate. Aaron gave me a quick hug, already half-turned toward the entrance. "Hey, Tess, should be a decent night. Some good connections here." "Connections?" I said. "I'm sure." My father was looking at the seating board. He said, "We're at table 4. That's with the Langfords and Dr. Patel. Good placement." Then he glanced at the volunteer holding the guest list. "If there's a mix-up with her seat, just put her at one of the back tables. She won't mind. Front section is mostly sponsors and board." That's when my mother touched my elbow and gave me that quiet warning. "Tessa, sweetheart, don't mention mops or mildew at table 9. Aaron's people are all medical." That was the moment you already heard about. The moment I realized nothing had changed for them. Not after all the years. Not after all the work. Not after everything I had built. To them, I was still the daughter with the practical job who needed to stay in her lane so the important people could talk. I didn't argue. I didn't correct them. I just stepped aside and let them go in first. Because I already knew something they didn't. My check-in wasn't at the main table. It was at the sponsor desk. I waited until my family disappeared into the ballroom, and then I walked up to the coordinator standing near the side podium. She looked down at her list, then up at me, and her whole face changed. "Oh, Ms. Monroe. Hi. We were expecting you earlier." "I got caught in traffic," I said. "No problem at all. You're all set. We have you for the sponsor reception at 7:30, then stage seating after the second presentation." She handed me a black badge with a gold stripe across the top. Founders Circle. I clipped it to my dress. She said, "Do you need us to move your guest to the head table?" I smiled. "No guest tonight." She nodded like she understood more than I said. That little exchange took maybe 30 seconds. Nobody from my family saw it. I walked into the ballroom from the side entrance, not the main one, and stood near the back for a minute just looking at the room. Round tables, white cloth, and gold chairs, stage lit in blue, big screen with the Alliance logo looping. I could see my family at table 4, my mother talking, my father leaning back like he owned the place, Aaron already shaking hands with someone, Lily smiling at exactly the right moments. I watched them for a second. Not angry, just clear. That's the only word for it. Clear. For years I had thought if I worked hard enough, if I explained things better, if I proved myself enough, something in them would shift. It never had. Because their story about me was comfortable, and people protect comfortable stories. I felt someone come up beside me. "Hey." It was Naomi. She was in a black suit instead of a dress, hair pulled back, badge clipped to her lapel. I said, "You made it." She said, "Wouldn't miss this for anything." She followed my eyes to table 4. "That them?" "Yep." She watched for a second, then said, "They look very confident." I laughed under my breath. "They always do." She looked at my badge. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so." She tilted her head. "You sure you don't want me sitting with you when this starts?" I shook my head. "No. I want to see their faces from the stage." She smiled slow. "That's cold." "It's honest." We stood there for a minute without talking. Then the event coordinator came over. "Ms. Monroe, we're about 10 minutes from sponsor reception. We'll need you near the front." I nodded. Naomi squeezed my shoulder once. "Go get your seat at the front," she said quietly. I started walking toward the front section, past table after table, heels clicking on the floor, people talking, laughing, drinking wine, not paying attention to me at all. Which was exactly how my family always saw me. Someone moving through the room, not the reason for it. When I reached the front, the coordinator stopped me near the stage steps. "We'll bring you up after the Civic Award," she said. "You'll be right before the closing remarks." I said, "Got it." She handed me a folded program. My name was on the third line from the bottom. I stared at it for a second longer than I meant to. Then I heard my mother's voice behind me. "Tessa?" I turned. She was standing there with her purse in her hand, looking confused. "Oh," she said. "You're up here." "Yeah." She glanced at the reserved table, then back at me. "This section is for sponsors." "I know." She frowned slightly. "Well, we're over there. Table 4. "I know." There was a pause. She lowered her voice. "Oh, did they seat you wrong?" I could have told her right then. I could have said everything. I could have ended it in the lobby. But something in me wanted the room to see it the way I had seen it for years. Out loud. In front of everyone. So I just smiled. "No. They put me where I'm supposed to be." She looked like she wanted to ask more, but someone called her name from behind, and she turned away. "Just come sit with us when you're done up here," she said, already distracted. "Okay." She walked back toward table 4. I watched her go, and that was the moment the shift finished inside me. Not anger, not hurt. Decision. For years I had been patient because I thought patience meant wisdom. That night I understood something else. Patience only works when the other side is capable of seeing you. If they aren't, patience just makes you smaller. The lights dimmed a little as the program started. People found their seats. Glasses clinked. Chairs scraped. The host walked onto the stage. I took my place in the row of reserved seats near the steps, badge catching the light every time I moved. Across the room, my family settled in at table 4. Talking, laughing, completely comfortable. They had no idea that in less than 40 minutes, the entire room was going to hear my name before theirs. And they had no idea that the seat they thought I didn't belong in was the one I had built myself. That was the last quiet moment before everything changed. The program started at exactly 7:58 p.m. I know that because the digital clock on the side wall of the ballroom was right in my line of sight from the reserved seating row, and I kept looking at it without meaning to. Not because I was nervous, more because my body felt very still, and when that happens, my brain looks for something steady to hold on to. The host did the welcome speech first, then a short sponsor thank you, then the Civic Service Award. People clapped politely, glasses clinked. Waiters moved in and out with trays like it was any other formal dinner. From where I was sitting, I could see table 4 perfectly. My mother leaned forward every time someone important walked by. My father kept scanning the room the way he always does, like he's measuring who matters. Aaron was half turned toward a man in a gray suit, already in conversation. Lily was smiling at exactly the right moments, hands folded, posture perfect. They hadn't looked toward the front once. Not once. And halfway through the second award, Naomi slipped into the empty seat beside me. "You good?" she whispered. "Yeah." "You're very calm." "I've had a lot of practice." She smiled without looking at me. "You want me to watch them when it happens?" I shook my head. "No, I want to see it myself." She nodded once. "Fair enough." The Civic Award ended at 8:31. I remember because the coordinator leaned down and said, "You're next. We'll bring you up after the sponsor remarks." My hands were resting on my lap. I noticed my watch was still 5 minutes fast. 8:36 on my wrist, 8:31 on the wall. I took one slow breath. Across the room, my mother was laughing at something someone said. My father had his arm draped over the back of his chair. Aaron was checking his phone. They still thought this was his night. The sponsor speaker went up. Host talked for about 5 minutes, thanked donors, mentioned the scholarship fund, the growth of local business partnerships, the usual things. Then the host came back to the podium. "And now," he said, "we're going to recognize someone whose work over the past decade has changed the way this city looks at opportunity, hiring, and what it means to build something from the ground up." I saw my mother's head tilt slightly, the way she does when she's trying to figure out who they're talking about. The host kept going. This year's Founders Impact Award goes to a business owner who started with one small contract and turned it into a regional operation employing more than 40 people across multiple counties. Aaron stopped looking at his phone. My father leaned forward. A company that has partnered with schools, hospitals, as in municipal facilities, and that has stepped in during storm damage, flooding, and emergency closures when no one else could respond fast enough. My mother's smile faded just a little. The host looked down at the card in his hand. Please join me in congratulating the founder and CEO of Clean Line Facility Services, Tessa Monroe. There's a moment when a room reacts before it understands. A ripple of applause started from the front tables. Then it spread. I stood up. Naomi squeezed my arm once and whispered, "Go." I walked toward the stage steps. Heels on carpet. Lights bright. Applause getting louder. Halfway up the steps, I looked out across the room, and I saw them. All 3 of them frozen at table 4. My mother's hand still on her glass. My father staring at the stage like he hadn't heard correctly. And Aaron turning his head from the program to me and back again. I don't think they moved for a full 3 seconds. The host shook my hand. "Tessa, congratulations. Well deserved." "Thank you." He handed me the plaque. Heavy, black glass, gold lettering. Founders Impact Award. Tessa Monroe Clean Line Facility Services. I turned toward the audience. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see every face clearly, but I could see table 4. My mother's mouth was slightly open. My father had both hands on the table. Aaron was sitting completely still, eyes locked on me. The host leaned toward the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words?" I hadn't planned a speech. I took the mic anyway. "Hi," I said. My voice sounded exactly like it always does. Not shaking, not loud, just normal. "Thank you. Now, this means a lot to me." A few people nodded. I looked down at the plaque for a second, then back up. I started my company in 2016 with 1 contract, 6 employees, and a storage unit office that cost $95 a month. I didn't come from a business family. I didn't have investors. I just had people who trusted me to show up when the work needed to be done. I saw Naomi smiling from the side. I kept going. We clean buildings, we fix water damage, we handle the stuff most people never see so that everything else can look like it runs smoothly. It's not glamorous work, but it matters, and I'm proud of every person on my team who shows up at 5 in the morning or midnight or whenever the job calls. The room clapped a little. I paused. Then I said the only thing I hadn't planned but knew I needed to say. For a long time, and I thought success meant people noticing what you were doing. I've learned it actually means building something solid whether anyone notices or not. That line hung in the air for a second. I didn't look at my family when I said it. I didn't need to. I'm grateful to this city for giving me a chance to build something real. Thank you. I handed the mic back. More applause. Not huge, not dramatic, just real. I stepped down from the stage, plaque in my hands, heart steady, breathing normal. The coordinator leaned toward me. "Head table or sponsor table?" I said, "Sponsor is fine." She nodded. As I walked past table 4, my mother stood up so fast, her chair scraped loud enough that the couple next to her turned around. "Tessa?" I stopped. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Up close, I could see every expression clearly. My mother looked stunned. My father looked like someone had just changed the rules of a game he thought he understood. Aaron looked confused. Actually confused. Like he was trying to fit a new fact into an old story, and it wouldn't go. My mother said, very quietly, "Why didn't you tell us?" I held the plaque in one hand, the edge cool against my palm. "You never asked." Silence. My father cleared his throat. "You own that company?" "Yes." "How long?" 8 years. Aaron blinked. "That's the cleaning thing?" I nodded. "It's a facilities company. We do about $3 million a year." He stared at me. My mother shook her head slightly like she was trying to wake up. "We thought, you never said..." I smiled a little. "I tried. A few times." Nobody spoke. People at nearby tables were still clapping for the next award. And music started again. Normal noise came back into the room, but at table 4, everything felt very still. My father finally said, quieter than I'd ever heard him in public, "You should have told us." I met his eyes. "I thought you knew me." That landed harder than anything else. Aaron leaned back in his chair, looking at the plaque, then at me. "You built all that yourself?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, like he didn't know what to do with that answer. My mother reached out like she was going to touch my arm, then stopped halfway. "We're proud of you," she said. The words sounded unfamiliar in her mouth, not fake, just late. I held the plaque against my side. "I have to get back up front," I said. My voice was calm. No edge, no drama, just done. I turned and walked toward the sponsor table. Behind me, as I heard my chair at table 4 stay empty, I didn't go back to table 4 that night. I sat at the sponsor table like the coordinator suggested, between a logistics company owner from Concord and a woman who ran a catering group I'd worked with once during a school renovation project. We talked about staffing, insurance rates, supply costs, the kind of conversations I was used to having. Normal, grounded, real. Every once in a while I could feel my family looking at me from across the room, not in a dramatic way, just watching, like they were trying to figure out when I had become someone they didn't recognize. The rest of the program ended around 9:40. People stood up, chairs scraped, music started again, and the room shifted from formal to social, the way those events always do. Clusters of people near the bar, handshakes, business cards, polite laughs. I was talking to one of the Alliance board members when I heard my name behind me. "Tessa." My mother. I turned. She was standing there with my father and Aaron a step behind her. Lily was a little off to the side, holding her clutch with both hands, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to be part of the conversation. For a second, nobody said anything. Then my mother looked at the plaque in my hand again. "I still can't believe we didn't know." I said, "You knew I had a business." "That's not the same as this." "No," I said. "It isn't." My father stepped forward slightly. "What exactly does your company do?" he asked. It wasn't rude. It was almost careful, like he didn't want to get the wording wrong this time. "We handle commercial facilities," I said. "Maintenance, sanitation, post-construction, emergency response, offices, schools, clinics, municipal buildings, mostly contracts." He nodded slowly. "And you built that yourself?" "Yes." "How many employees?" 46 right now." He looked down for a second, then back up. "That's substantial." That word again. Substantial. It almost made me smile. Aaron was still staring at the plaque. "You said 3 million?" he asked. "Last year was a little under that." He let out a breath. "Wow." That was the first time I had ever heard him sound like he didn't know where he stood in the room. My mother finally said the thing I think she had been trying to say since the moment my name was called. "Why didn't you tell us it had gotten this big?" I shifted the plaque to my other hand. "I told you pieces. You just didn't ask about the rest." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father looked at her, then back at me. "You should have insisted we understood," he said. I shook my head. "That's not how respect works." Silence again. Not angry, just heavy. Aaron rubbed the back of his neck the way he does when he's uncomfortable. "I guess we thought, I don't know, that you were doing okay, but not like this." I nodded. "I know." He looked at me for a second longer. "You could have said something." I met his eyes. "You could have asked something." That one sat there between us. Nobody had an answer for it. A waiter walked past with a tray of champagne. Someone laughed across the room. The band started setting up for the closing set. Everything around us kept moving like normal. My mother's voice got softer. "We're proud of you, Tessa. We really are." I believed that she meant it. I also knew it didn't change the years before that moment. "Thank you," I said. She reached out again, this time actually touching my arm. You should come sit with us. Everyone wants to talk to you now. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. Then I looked at table 4. Same table, same people, same seats, just a different story now. I'm good here, I said. Her hand dropped slowly. My father nodded once, like he understood something he hadn't understood before. Well, he said quietly, we'll talk later. Okay. Aaron gave a small half smile. Seriously, though, that's impressive. I smiled back. Thanks. They stood there another second, like they were waiting for something else. Then my mother said, We'll let you get back to your people. Your people. Not said sarcastically, just accurate. They walked away together. I watched them go, then turned back to the conversation at my table, like nothing unusual had happened. Because in my world, nothing unusual had. I had been this person for years. They were just meeting her for the first time. The texts started the next morning. First, my mother. I didn't sleep much. I keep thinking about last night. I wish we had understood sooner. Then my father. You should come by this week. I'd like to hear more about the business. Then Aaron. Okay, I need the full story because I clearly missed a lot. I stared at the phone for a long time before answering any of them. Not because I was angry, because I was deciding what access looked like now. That's the part nobody tells you about moments like that. The reveal feels big, but what comes after is quieter. So people want to rewrite the past once they realize they got the story wrong. And you have to decide how much editing you're willing to allow. I called Danny first. She answered and said, "Tell me everything." I sat on my couch, still in sweatpants, plaque on the coffee table in front of me. It went exactly how you think it went. She laughed. Your mom faint? No. Worse. She was polite. Oh, wow, that's serious. I told her the whole thing. The stage, the table, the questions, the look on my dad's face. Aaron saying, the cleaning thing? When I finished, she was quiet for a second. Then she said, You okay? I looked at the plaque again. Black glass, gold letters, my name spelled right, my title spelled right. Yeah, I said. I think I am. You sound different. I feel different. How? I thought about it. They finally saw me, but I realized I don't need them to anymore. She let out a slow breath. That's the good kind of sad. Yeah, that was exactly what it was. Not victory, not revenge, just clarity. A week later, I went to my parents' house for dinner. Same dining room, same table, same silverware my mother has used since I was 12. But the conversation was different. My father asked real questions. How do you bid contracts? What's your biggest expense line? Do you plan to expand outside the county? My mother asked about my employees by name after I mentioned them once. Aaron asked how emergency response billing worked. Nobody said, your little thing. Nobody said practical. Nobody told me to sit at the back. It should have felt like everything was fixed. It didn't. It just felt accurate. And that was enough. When dinner ended, my mother walked me to the door. She said, I hope you know we always loved you. I nodded. I know. She hesitated. We just didn't always understand you. I put my coat on. You understood exactly what you were looking at, I said gently. You just didn't think it was important. Her eyes got a little wet, but she didn't argue. I kissed her cheek and left. No fight, no big speech, no dramatic ending. Just the truth, said out loud. The plaque sits in my office now, not on the front wall, not where clients see it first. It's on the shelf behind my desk next to my grandmother's watch and the first contract I ever signed, framed in cheap black wood. The ink is faded. The paper's a little warped. Total monthly value, $2,300. That contract built everything. Not the gala, not the award, not the applause, the work. That's the lesson. If there is one. Financial independence isn't about proving something to your family. It's about never needing them to believe in you before you believe in yourself. For years, I thought success meant getting a seat at their table. Turns out I built my own table a long time ago. And the night they finally noticed, I didn't need the chair anymore. If you've ever been the one people underestimated, the one they asked the short questions, the one they thought was doing fine but nothing special, I see you. Keep building anyway. One day, the truth will walk into the room before you do, and when it does, you won't have to say a word.